Among the big winners of the night was Minnesota State Representative Ilhan Omar, who became the first Somali American to be elected to Congress.
Are you ready? Voters in Minnesota and Michigan elected the first two Muslim women to serve in the U.S. Congress. A former refugee who fled Somalia's civil war. Omar, a 36-year-old Somali refugee who immigrated to the United States as a teenager, bet Republican Jennifer Zielinski to take Ellison's seat, which he vacated to run for Minnesota Attorney General.
And here before you tonight as your Congresswoman-elect with many firsts behind my name. The first woman of color to represent our state in Congress. The first woman to wear a hijab to represent us in Congress. And one of the first Muslim women elected to Congress.
One of the first two Muslim women elected to the United States Congress, Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, said after being elected she does, in fact, support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. This targets businesses that do business in Israel, threatening them unless they cut off all economic ties with Israel. During her campaign, she said the BDS movement was counteractive and prevented dialogue that might lead to a two-state solution with the Palestinians. Well, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's done any honest research into Islam at all. Islam basically gives its followers permission to lie to the kafir, which would be you and me, presumably, until they're in a position of strength to do what they are commanded to do, which is take over the world. The other Muslim woman elected to Congress, Rashida Tlaib from the Detroit area, also supports the BDS movement.
And I think when people who aren't Muslim who you're talking, anyone who might be on the fence about whether they, for example, want to be welcoming Muslims in their country might be comforted. And I know a lot of people who have heard our interviews together have commented, wow, great, I wish that your message would get more popular across the Muslim world. But there are also people who I think are a little bit more cynical who bring up the issue of Taqiya. Now, for anyone who might not be familiar with that, would you mind giving us, I guess, an explanation of what that is?
Taqiya is present in the Sunni school of thought and the Shia school of thought, basically in all Islamic denominations and schools of thought. But it is more practiced in the Shia school of thought than the Sunni school of thought. It's more popular in the Shia school of thought, which I belong to. And what Taqiya is, it's basically the permissibility to deceive someone, and it could be anyone, in order to save your life or in order to get out of trouble. Mm-hmm. Now, what the viewers or what the people commenting were referring to was not Taqiya, because Taqiya is basically to save one's life. So if I was sitting here and you came and you were looking for someone and I knew that they were going to be harmed, and you ask me, did you see so-and-so? And I say, no. That is a lie, because they were just here, but I tried to save their life. That's taqiyya, and it's taken from the word yattaqi, and it can be applied many times. What the people commenting on our social media are referring to is tawriya. Tawriya is another form of deception, and that is, for example, if you were to ask me, for example, if I were to put my ring in my pocket, for example, and you were to ask me, hey Imam, would you have another ring for me to have? And I would say, no, really, I don't have another one on my other hand, right? But it's in my pocket, for example. Or if someone was to ask me for financial help, and I say, oh, I have nothing in my pockets, but it's in the bank. That's tawriya. It's a form of deception to get myself away from the situation. And extremists use this a lot to further the cause of their Islamist agenda and to spread their fundamentalist teachings, by playing so many victim cards. And tawriya is part of their mission. Why I don't engage in that, or if I do, if I do, then the Muslims would know. If I was a taqiyya, tawriya master, deceiving the Western world, the Muslims would know. and they would be cheering me for reaching this far and sitting in parliaments and meeting with diplomatic leaders, and they would be thinking I'm a hero. But instead, if you search the news, I'm punched in the face, my home is attacked, my vehicles get destroyed, the amount of death threats, the bounties, and state intelligence spoke to me earlier this week, and they said that my book might even attract a fatwa. I mean, what I've written in my book isn't a work of taqiyya. I've basically let it all out there. And as for tawriya, I mean, another form of deception, I'm not speaking to Lauren and Lauren alone. When this goes out, you have people who are doctors in Islamic theology, faith leaders. There are serious giants in the academic field that know Islam. If I was to engage in this practice, and if I have been engaging in this practice for so long, I mean, these people would have known by now. But no, the answer I give is, when you see me doing what I do, if you believe it's good, then support me. If the moment you see me flip against you, then flip against me. And I think that's a fair way to put it. I don't engage in taqiyya or tawriya or muruna or kitman, all of these Islamic deception, because I don't believe that they are needed.
Mm-hmm. But would you, I guess regardless of whether they might be needed or not, do you think that these forms of deception, and perhaps maybe not to save your life, but do you think deception would be hypothetically permissible by God if it were to further his religion?
Yes, it would be, because look, God, when you take a look at Jesus Christ, when you take a look at the story of Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Daniel, all of the Abrahamic prophets and messengers, each one of them came across a situation where they had to do everything they can to get out of that situation. And for example, in the issue of Jesus Christ, for example, and this is the Muslim Jesus, I'm not referring to the Christian Jesus. The Jesus presented to Muslims, in many cases, people asked him in markets, "Are you Jesus, the son of Mary?" And he would say no, in order to save his life. Because obviously there was no Google images, you couldn't tell who was who unless you asked about him, and he would be pointed in that direction. So he denied he was Jesus many times. And even Moses, when he was a child, and he was taken care of by Asiya, the wife of the Pharaoh, and he refused numerous times, and his parents also refused numerous times, and the carers refused to identify him as Moses, because then he would be killed. Getting yourself out of trouble, I think, is a noble thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to get yourself out of trouble, but I think it's terrible to deceive people. And we live in a time where I don't need to deceive you to get my point across. I don't need to deceive anyone to gain a following. There's an audience for everything. And you can state your message and you'll have followers. So I condemn people who engage in taqiyya and tawriya and all of these nonsenses. I think they're a waste of time and no longer needed.